What's up, everybody? Hope you are all doing well today. I want to get started and talk about the second part of our media flight plan example 2 in this case. I did want to remind you that these are due by Thursday, so that is this time today. So please turn those in ASAP. And like I said, kind of honor system. Like I said, I know I've written the answers down with the actual copy of it, so if you don't have the book, but please try to do them on your own accord. But I am going to go through the answers again, as this is just kind of going to be a reoccurring theme to try to help you all out in terms of not only giving you the right idea about what you're going to be doing with this math, but also taking a look at Excel, and again, bringing these formulas into life into a database. So that is going to be crucial. I will do a couple of the small macros within Microsoft Excel. Like I said, a lot of these are really simple. So, but I do want to mention, for kind of everybody's sake here, that kind of as we are going along, I'll probably stop doing them. Just because, if you've been watching the videos, they should be pretty easy to go through. So I'll still go over these answers each time they come around in the examples. But the one thing I won't do is just the actual macros. So I'll probably just go through them pretty quickly and just solve them as best, solve them accordingly. And like I said, it might take a couple of macros within Excel that are something that you've seen before. If there's anything new, I'll make sure to reiterate what those are and how to do them as we go along. I don't anticipate too many that are going to be like that, but anyway. So first and foremost, I'm going to keep doing these like I did last time and show you in terms of how many impressions are in one gross rating point for each target. So they're looking for the convert target data to complete the numbers and divide by 100. And so in the convert target data, we're looking at the universe and multiplying it by 1 million. And so you will see right here, as I zoom in. So the universe here times 1 million. And that's going to be divided by 100. And so, like I said, I won't do this every time, but I'll show you another example. So, again, if you're trying to solve for something like this real quickly, again, it's equals cell number in this case, and you are going to multiply. So, again, it's the Shift 8 key. And then you will go into the million, divide by 100. And then you have your number. So this is going to be based on the impressions. If you're looking through the impressions in this case, adults 25 to 54 is obviously the front runner in this case in terms of the amount of impressions that you're going to get through this. So those are going to, again, this is really simple math to be able to talk about. Excuse me. Apologies. I hope I didn't wreck your headphones that way, and hopefully there won't be another one coming. So that's number one. So pretty simple. Number two, I'm going to correct my mistake from last time and actually show you the problem first before I actually get into the Excel spreadsheet here. So in this case, what we're going to be looking at are 4 very specific numbers here. And the first thing we're going to be looking at is we're going to be looking for GURPS. So this particular problem talks about 2 different populations. They talk about kids 6 through 14 years old, and then mothers of young children. So the ideal audience we're looking here are these 2 within our universe. So with this put into perspective, we have to look at the type of GURPS we're looking for. In this case, we look at 80 GURPS for children at an 85 reach, 240 GURPS at a 78 reach, and indicate what we're getting out of that. And so this is, once again, pretty simple math in terms of what we're doing here. So we have GURPS and reach. So again, kids, mothers in this case, and the adjacent reach that corresponds with GURPS in this case. So what we'll do is very simple. GURPS divided by reach. And this is where we get our frequency. So in this case, it's 3.5 for kids. And we would round up to 3.1 for mothers. And again, this is average frequency. So that's just one way to calculate through. And this is something that the book really kind of emphasizes of how they're all connected together with whether it's GURPS, reach, or average frequency. They're all calculated together. And there's a good problem on 77, or page 77, that talks about memorizing the formulas for GURPS, average frequency, and reach. They all work together in this case. And so, like I said, if you've got two, you can solve for the other. So that's one thing I will definitely make sure that we're aware of as we're going through these problems. So the average frequency in this case plays pretty well for, again, it's very similar in this case for kids and mothers alike. So that's number 2. Number 3 comes in target audience. Target, I'm going to use my R's here. Audience is children's age 6 to 14, and the communicated objectives of the next media flight call for these minimum. So, and then remember, the minimum is key here in this particular problem. So, in this case, we're looking at the gross rating points for this set of objectives. And remember, there's a plethora of ways that we can solve for GURPS. And so we've talked about the notion that you can calculate GURPS based on ratings times the amount of spots. Excuse me, wow, I had a brain fart there for a second. How many spots you can have on this. But it also, again, works with reach and frequency, as we mentioned, if you want to calculate for. So our key areas that we're looking for are reach in 80%, which remember that ratings in this case are also communicated by percentages as well, and then the average frequency of it, which is 6. And so what do? Very simple. You just take this information equals 80 in this case, so we're going to do reach times frequency, and you get 480 GURPS. So GRPS, not D. So these are your GURPS for this particular section. So they mention in question 4 about this whole notion of reaching 6 impressions here, and saying, what is it about this that all children will reach 6 impressions? And so I gathered from the people who have turned their homework assignments in already that they kind of understood what they meant by, quote, average, because, we see up here communication average frequency. So this is important here. So if it's the average frequency, the notion is that 6 is the mean in this case. So if 6 is the mean of an average frequency, that means that not every child ages 6 to 14 is going to be able to view this. Some will have more viewers for impressions in terms of those opportunities to see. Some will have less. It just will depend. But this is where the 6 impressions will lie. And I will add a answer key to that's going to be much cleaner than my writing ever will be, namely because it's typed. But for this particular one, they actually show a curve of how this average the impressions here and average frequency works in this case. So again, they won't necessarily reach the same amount, but it will average to that in particular. So again, 480 GURPS here, as well as the whole notion that this average frequency won't, this is what we'll gain, but not every child will reach 6 impressions by itself. So, I'm going to do one thing real quick, okay? This next one for question 5 is pretty easy because they pretty much just give you the damn answer. So what is the universe of men 18 to 34 in this magazine schedule? And it says tip, count the smiley faces. And so we have A through H, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 8 is your universe in this case. So when you're calculating for this one right here, you will have all of the information right here. And so paying attention to the dots within the smiley faces, but your universe in this case is represented by 8. Okay, so again, pretty straightforward, but I do want to run that through here. So we also mentioned here that calculating the ratings for each publication. So this is number 6. So rating equals targeted exposed divided by universe times 100. So again, we're trying to get to the ratings here. This has been kind of a formula that we're used to at this point. We've talked about it within the first chapter and the first example. So, pretty simple to be able to do, but now we've got this little handy-dandy graph here, down here for what we're going to be looking at. And so, pretty easy when we look at the universe. Remember, we have 8 people in the universe. So, car and driver, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 is going to be the target exposed for car and driver. GQ is 1, 2, 3. As well as the bicycling magazine is going to be 1, 2, and 3. So we just plug in the math. So target exposed. So we know the target exposed is based on 4, 3, and 3. Divided by the universe, which we know by our little smiley faces in question number 5 that is 8. And then again, plug in the numbers. So what we do in this case is we do 4, the equal sign, 4 divided by 8 times 100 equals 50. And so in this case, we're looking at the rating. So rating of 50, and the rest are 37.5. So this is going to be our ratings here. Now, remember the conversion for ratings in particular to GURPS, because remember GURPS are gross rating points. So that means multiple opportunities to see them. So when you're looking, for example, at question number 7 here, in terms of how many gross rating points, I think there were a few people that kind of got mixed up in terms of saying that naturally GURPS should be more than the rating itself. Which in this case, they don't actually talk about how many spots in this case. So we're looking at car and driver, GQ, and bicycle magazine. Well, what we're talking about here is that neither or any of these right here have multiple spots indicated. So the easy things in terms of coming up with gross rating points are just what you see right here. So 50, 37.5, 37.5. And so when we're looking at total gross rating points, it's pretty clear in this case. You just add them. So, and I didn't show you this last time. I honestly just forgot the formula. I've been working in Excel for almost 10 years now and doing very sophisticated statistical work with Excel. And I couldn't even remember one of the add functions, which is sum. I feel embarrassed that I messed that up on the last video. So in this case, you can do 2 different ways here. You can click on the cell and you can press plus, and then you can press plus and select the cells that way, and you'll get 125. So in this case, this is your total GURPS is 125. However, you can also do equals sum, highlight all 3, end your parentheses, and it's 125. And I'll just show you that real quick again. So it's equals, and you just type in SUM, sum, and then you open a parentheses. And then what it's going to do here in the parentheses, it's going to say, I want to know the range. So in this case, I'm going to indicate that the range is E2 through E4. And so what Excel is going to do is it's going to say, okay, said user wants to add all this stuff together. And that's what we'll do. So close parentheses to tell them that's my range, that's what I want done. And again, you reach the same conclusion at 125. So, again, this is going to be based here on the same thing in terms of having 125 GURPS. And again, because there are no additional spots in this case, the rating points and the GURPS are the exact same thing. And like I said, I think there were a few people that got that a little mixed up. Try not to overcomplicate it. When you see a number of spots that might complicate the GURPS formula, that's when you start moving in and saying, hey, GURPS is going to be different from ratings. If they don't mention that, you don't need to worry about it. So luckily, the same thing with gross impressions in this case is very similar in that fact. So if we're looking at, I looked at GURPS, let's look at number 8 in terms of gross impressions. So how many gross impressions does each magazine generate? So when we're looking at gross impressions, again, we're only dealing with one actual opportunity. So we're not dealing with multiple opportunities to complicate this formula any further than it needs to be, which will come eventually. But for right now, examples 1 and 2, they're playing very, very nice with everybody right now. Excuse me. And it's just simple math again. So in this case, we know that an impression, or in this case a gross impression, is based on the number of times seen a particular medium over the universe. But in this case, all they're asking is the impressions, and we know the impressions. It's 4, 3, and 3. So, again, we'll do the same thing. Sum. If I can type that correctly, and I didn't because I started with the parentheses. I am terrible at typing today. Sum, 4, 4, and 3, we all know 7. So, again, these are gross impressions based on these 3 mediums. Okay? So, again, these should be pretty simple to go through, but it takes time. And like I said, I'm not going to fault you for the math in this case, even though, like I said, this is really not that difficult to be able to do. Try not to overcomplicate it as best you can. I know sometimes when we're looking at this stuff, it can be a little bit daunting, especially when you're not familiar with it. Okay? So let's look at the next one. So we know what we know out of a couple different things here. We know our universe, which is 8. So if we look back over our smiley faces, we know that the universe is 8 here. But now we're looking for overall reach in this case. And so when we're looking at reach, remember this kind of works in a method of acting as a percentage. And so in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to look at all these people that have opportunities to view versus people who don't. And Media Flight Plan was very strategic in leaving some of these out. And I think this overcomplicated people because this one messed up a lot of people in particular to where a lot of people counted each one of these blocks. And you don't need to do that. This is all just based on overall reach. So it wasn't based on the magazines itself. They're saying magazine schedule. So this is the overall magazine schedule that we're dealing with here. And so for the magazine schedule, we notice that B has 2 impressions here. C has 1, D has 1, E has 3, F has 1, G has 0, H has 1. So G and A have 0 impressions that we're dealing with when it comes to the math that we're trying to calculate for reach. So the obvious thing we're going to do here is what we know in terms of calculating for the reach, which is exposure over universe times 100. And our exposure, in this case, is all the smiley faces that have dots in their little matrix here, versus the universe. So, easy enough. 6 divided by 8 times 100 equals 75. So you have a reach of 75 out of, again, the 8 people that are representative. And granted, like I said, they're using a low number on purpose, but you can kind of gather that this would be a much larger segment being represented here. So again, that's question 9. The last one for question 10 is looking at average frequency for this magazine schedule. And so we have to plug in a couple things that we know. And so if you looked at, I believe, I'll look one more time, is going to be page 77. We know that average frequency is GURPS over reach. And so in GURPS, in this case, we've calculated total GURPS up in question number 7. And total GURPS was 125. So in this case, we also want to look for the reach. And we also know this one, which is 75 because of what we just calculated down here. Oh, I did not plan those bars out very well. So 6 out of 8, 75. So the average frequency will be based on this whole notion of GURPS over reach. And so again, very, very simple. I have to delete that one. Oops, don't add a new sheet. Let's zoom in. So in this case, we'll have equals 125 over 75 is 1.6 bar over the repetent, and we're just going to calculate it and say round up to 1.7 as far as our average frequency here. So this is the average frequency for this particular magazine schedule based on the amount of GURPS, based on the reach. And this is more or less how you solve for these equations right here. So again, not very difficult to do, but the important thing is that not only are we getting the answers and understanding some of the formulas here, but also may be able to plug in some of this information in much larger scale data. So as you're going in, you can indicate things like frequency and GURPS and going into your particular ratings and all that kind of stuff. But again, the important thing is to do this in a large scale and being able to calculate all this for your plans book based on the information that is given. So like I said, some of them you won't be able to have. We can just do the best with what we have to do with. And for the most part, I look for GURPS, I look for average frequency and total number of impressions as best you can to help calculate this for our project that we're doing. So that's it for today in this particular Excel tutorial here. I think for next week we'll be doing pretty much the same thing in terms of we'll go over chapter 3 and then I'll touch base into Wednesday and Thursday of calculating some of the answers for Media Flight Plan for chapters 3 or examples 3 and 4, excuse me. And I'll also put up an ASU Learn link or Dropbox for you to put those in. So that's all for today. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Let me know if you have any questions in the meantime, particularly with research or Media Flight Plan or what have you. And yeah, I will be more than happy to get in touch with you. So thank you all. Have a great weekend. Bye.